February 16th, 1945. 11:40 hours. Iwo Jima. The enormous muzzle blast from Battery A, 7th Field Artillery Battalion, shook the volcanic ash beneath Colonel Harry Schmidt's command post like an earthquake. Through his field glasses, Schmidt watched the 155mm high-explosive shell arc through the clear Pacific morning toward the invisible Japanese bunkers honeycombing Mount Suribachi. 8 miles offshore, the USS Nevada's 14-inch naval guns thundered in support, but it was the methodical, precise fire of the M11 55mm howitzers that was systematically dismantling General Tadamichi Kuribayashi's supposedly impregnable fortress. What Colonel Schmidt didn't know as he coordinated the largest artillery bombardment in Pacific War history was that in the tunnels beneath his feet, Japanese observers were transmitting radio reports to Tokyo that would forever change how the Imperial Japanese Army understood American industrial firepower. Major Yoshitaka Hori, communications officer for the 109th Infantry Division, crouched in a concrete bunker 40 feet below ground, his hands trembling as he recorded the American artillery fire patterns. The methodical precision horrified him more than the raw destructive power. Every 30 seconds, another 95-pound high-explosive shell detonated with mathematical accuracy. The Americans weren't firing wildly or emotionally. They were conducting industrial demolition with scientific precision. Battery after battery of 155mm howitzers fired in carefully coordinated sequences, each gun crew working with the mechanical efficiency of a factory assembly line. Major Hori's final radio transmission to Imperial General Headquarters would capture the terror that the Japanese defenders felt. The American artillery operates like a giant machine. They do not seek to destroy us quickly through massive bombardment. They seek to eliminate us systematically, bunker by bunker, cave by cave, man by man. They have all the time in the world and unlimited ammunition. We have never faced such abundance applied with such precision. What Major Hori was witnessing was the culmination of American artillery development that had begun in the factories of Detroit and Pittsburgh 2 years earlier. The M1 155mm howitzer represented the marriage of American mass production with German-inspired ballistic science, creating the most effective medium artillery piece of World War II. Each gun weighed 11,968 pounds, fully assembled, required a crew of 11 men, and could deliver a 95-pound high-explosive shell with devastating accuracy at ranges up to 16,000 yards. But the true revolution wasn't in the individual weapons' specifications. It was in America's ability to produce these complex machines in quantities that defied Japanese comprehension while maintaining quality control standards that exceeded German peacetime manufacturing. The decision to assault Iwo Jima had been made at the highest levels of American strategy. This 8-square-mile volcanic island, just 760 miles from Tokyo, served as an early warning station for Japanese air defenses and a base for fighter aircraft that harassed American B-29 bombing missions. More critically, Iwo Jima offered the possibility of an emergency landing field for damaged superfortresses returning from Japan. General Curtis LeMay's bombing campaign against Japanese cities required this strategic stepping stone. Admiral Chester Nimitz and General Douglas MacArthur agreed. Iwo Jima must be captured regardless of cost. The island's defensive preparations, however, represented the most sophisticated fortifications the Japanese had ever constructed. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commanding the 21st Mixed Brigade and 109th Infantry Division, had spent 8 months transforming Iwo Jima into what he called an underground battleship. Learning from the catastrophic defeats at Tarawa and Saipan, where Japanese forces had been annihilated by American naval gunfire, Kuribayashi abandoned beach defenses in favor of depth. His 21,000 defenders had excavated 11 miles of interconnected tunnels, constructed 5,000 individual fighting positions, and embedded 361 artillery pieces in concrete bunkers designed to withstand direct hits from 16-inch naval guns. Most dangerously, Kuribayashi had installed his defensive positions in overlapping fields of fire, creating killing zones where every approach was covered by multiple weapons. American intelligence estimated that capturing Iwo Jima would require 5 days and cost 15,000 casualties. The actual battle would last 36 days and cost 28,686 American casualties, including 6,821 killed in action. The artillery bombardment that preceded the invasion represented the largest concentration of American firepower ever assembled for a Pacific operation. Task Force 54, under Rear Admiral William Blandy, included 7 battleships, 4 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and 34 destroyers. These warships would fire 21,926 shells of 5-inch caliber or larger during the 3-day preliminary bombardment. But naval gunfire, despite its awesome power, suffered from fundamental limitations when engaging deeply buried fortifications. The high-angle trajectory required for maximum penetration was impossible for naval guns firing from ships several miles offshore. Even the massive 16-inch shells from the USS Nevada and USS Idaho, weighing 2,700 pounds each, could not reach the deepest Japanese positions. This is where the M11 55mm howitzer would prove decisive. The 155mm howitzer's development traced to a 1940 requirement from the U.S. Army Field Artillery Board for a medium artillery piece that could provide longer range and greater accuracy than existing weapons. The Army wanted a gun that could fire a 95-pound projectile to 16,000 yards with sufficient accuracy to engage point targets. More importantly, the weapon had to be producible in large quantities using American mass production techniques. The final design, designated the M11 55mm howitzer, emerged from collaboration between the Army's Watertown Arsenal and civilian contractors led by the Rock Island Arsenal. The engineering challenge was immense, creating a weapon that could generate the enormous pressures required to propel a 95-pound shell while remaining light enough for tactical mobility and simple enough for mass production. The M1's most innovative feature was its variable charge system, allowing gun crews to select from 7 different propellant charges depending on range and trajectory requirements. Charge 1, using just 2.75 pounds of powder, could lob shells in a high arc over obstacles at short range. Charge 7, burning 14.94 pounds of smokeless powder, could reach maximum range with a relatively flat trajectory. This flexibility allowed the same gun to serve as both a howitzer for indirect fire and a gun for direct engagement of fortifications. The weapon's split-trail carriage, copied from German designs captured in North Africa, provided a 60-degree traverse and elevation from -2 to +63 degrees. This meant each howitzer could engage targets across a wide arc without repositioning, critical for the confined spaces of Pacific Island warfare. Production of the M11 55mm howitzer showcased American industrial capabilities at their peak. The primary contractor, Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois, had been completely retooled for wartime production by January 1943. The complex machining required for the gun tube, which had to withstand chamber pressures of 38,000 pounds per square inch, pushed American metallurgy to its limits. Each tube required 48 hours of continuous machining using carbide-tipped tools, followed by heat treatment in furnaces that consumed more electricity than small cities. The tolerances were measured in thousandths of an inch. A single dimensional error could cause catastrophic failure that would kill the entire gun crew. Yet, American quality control achieved rejection rates below 2%, better than German peacetime standards. By D-Day at Iwo Jima, American industry had produced 4,035 M11 55mm howitzers, each requiring 15,000 individual parts manufactured to exacting specifications. The ammunition production was even more impressive. Each high-explosive shell contained precisely 15.5 pounds of Composition B explosive, manufactured at 17 different plants across the United States. The shell casing, forged from high-carbon steel, required 127 separate manufacturing operations. The fuse, either the M48-point detonating or M67-point detonating delay, contained 34 precision components that had to function perfectly after being subjected to launch forces exceeding 15,000 Gs. By February 1945, American factories were producing 250,000 155mm shells monthly, a rate that exceeded total German 150mm ammunition production throughout the entire war. The logistics of supporting artillery operations at Iwo Jima defied Japanese comprehension. Each M1 155mm howitzer required approximately 3 tons of ammunition daily during active combat operations. The 4 artillery battalions assigned to support the invasion, totaling 48 guns, would consume 144 tons of ammunition daily. Over the 36-day battle, they fired 203,914 rounds, totaling approximately 19,372 tons of ordnance. This single battle consumed more artillery ammunition than Japan produced in all calibers during the first 2 years of the Pacific War. The ammunition arrived aboard specially configured LSTS that could deliver palletized shells directly to gun positions. Each LST carried 5,155mm rounds in climate-controlled holds that prevented propellant degradation in the tropical heat. Lieutenant Colonel Randolph M. Pate, commanding the 1st Battalion, 13th Marine Regiment, understood that conventional tactics would fail against Kuribayashi's defensive system. The Japanese had learned from previous defeats that mass charges and fanatical resistance were suicidal against American firepower. Instead, they had created a defensive system designed to bleed the Americans slowly, making each yard of advance cost maximum casualties. Pate's solution was methodical destruction using artillery as the primary weapon. Every cave, every bunker, every suspected fighting position would be engaged systematically until nothing remained. This wasn't warfare as traditionally understood. It was industrial demolition applied to military objectives. The preliminary bombardment began at 0645 hours on February 16, 1945. For 3 days, American naval guns and artillery pounded Iwo Jima with unprecedented intensity. The USS Nevada's 14-inch guns, firing 1,900-pound armor-piercing shells, could penetrate 30 feet of reinforced concrete. The USS Idaho and USS Tennessee added their massive firepower, while cruisers and destroyers engaged smaller targets. But the most effective weapons proved to be the 155mm howitzers positioned on nearby islands and later on Iwo Jima itself. Their ability to fire at high angles allowed them to reach targets that naval guns could not engage. More importantly, their crews could adjust fire based on ground observers' corrections, something impossible for ships firing from miles offshore. Major Charles Waterhouse, forward observer for the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment, provided the most detailed account of the 155mm howitzer's effectiveness against Japanese fortifications. Operating from an exposed position, just 200 yards from enemy lines, Waterhouse directed fire missions against bunkers that had withstood direct hits from naval gunfire. His radio transmissions, preserved in military archives, capture the weapon's devastating precision. Fire mission. Grid 314159. Reinforced concrete bunker. Troops in open. Fire when ready. Within 90 seconds, the first ranging round impacted 50 yards from the target. Drop 50. Right 25. Fire for effect. The adjustment brought 4 guns to bear on the bunker. 8 rounds of 155mm high-explosive shells detonated within a 25-yard radius of the target. When the smoke cleared, the bunker had collapsed, its steel-reinforced concrete walls reduced to rubble. The Japanese defenders had never experienced such precise, sustained artillery fire. Their own artillery, while numerous and well-positioned, suffered from critical limitations that the Americans exploited ruthlessly. Japanese guns were manufactured to lower tolerances than American weapons, reducing their accuracy at long range. More critically, Japanese ammunition production had been compromised by material shortages. Shell casings were made from recycled steel of varying quality. Propellant charges were inconsistent due to chemical shortages. Fuses failed at rates exceeding 15% compared to less than 2% for American ordnance. Most devastating of all, Japanese artillery units had limited ammunition reserves. Each gun received approximately 200 rounds for the entire battle. American guns, by contrast, fired an average of 4,248 rounds per tube during the 36-day engagement. The technological superiority of American artillery extended beyond the weapons themselves to the fire control systems that coordinated their employment. The Field Artillery Intelligence System, developed specifically for Pacific operations, allowed multiple batteries to engage single targets with devastating concentration. Fire direction centers, equipped with mechanical computers and detailed maps, could calculate firing data for complex missions in minutes rather than hours. Communications networks using FM radio sets provided reliable coordination between observers, fire direction centers, and gun batteries. This system integration allowed American artillery to respond to targets of opportunity within 3 minutes of initial contact, compared to 15 to 30 minutes for Japanese defensive fires. The human cost of the American artillery bombardment became apparent during the first week of ground combat. As Marines advanced inland from the beaches, they discovered the carnage that 155mm shells had inflicted on Japanese defensive positions. Sergeant John Basiloni of the 1st Battalion, 27th Marine Regiment, provided a representative account in a letter to his family. The Jap positions looked like someone took a giant hammer to them. Concrete walls 3 feet thick are cracked and broken. Steel reinforcing bars are twisted like pretzels. In one bunker, we found 47 Japanese soldiers who had been killed by a single shell that penetrated the roof. The precision of our artillery boys is unbelievable. They can put a shell through a window at 10,000 yards. The psychological impact on Japanese defenders was as devastating as the physical destruction. Surviving Japanese accounts, discovered in documents captured after the war, reveal the terror that American artillery accuracy instilled. Private First Class Takeshi Yamamoto, 109th Infantry Division, wrote in his diary, "The American shells find us no matter where we hide. They do not fire at random like our artillery. Each shell seems aimed specifically at our position. We hear the guns fire in the distance, then count the seconds until the shells arrive. Always the same timing, always the same accuracy. It is like being hunted by a machine that never tires, never misses, never runs out of ammunition." This entry was found beside Yamamoto's body in a collapsed bunker that had taken a direct hit from a 155mm shell. By February 23rd, 7 days after the initial landing, American artillery had achieved something unprecedented in Pacific warfare: the systematic neutralization of prepared defensive positions through firepower alone. Previous island campaigns had required costly ground assaults to reduce Japanese fortifications. At Iwo Jima, artillery preparation was so thorough that Marines often found abandoned positions where defenders had simply fled, rather than face continued bombardment. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Alexander, official historian of the Iwo Jima campaign, calculated that artillery fire accounted for 60% of all Japanese casualties during the battle, a higher percentage than any previous Pacific operation. The flag raising on Mount Suribachi, immortalized in Joe Rosenthal's famous photograph, was only possible because of the artillery preparation that had preceded it. The mountain's defensive positions, carved deep into volcanic rock and reinforced with steel and concrete, had been systematically destroyed by coordinated fire from 155mm howitzers and naval guns. Battery C, 1st Battalion, 13th Marine Regiment, alone fired 1,847 rounds at Suribachi positions during the first week of combat. Each shell, weighing 95 pounds and containing 15.5 pounds of high explosive, could penetrate 8 feet of reinforced concrete. The cumulative effect created a moonscape of craters and rubble where once impregnable bunkers had stood. Captain William Sessions, commanding Battery B, 2nd Battalion, 14th Marine Regiment, witnessed the transformation of warfare that American artillery superiority represented. In his post-battle report, Sessions wrote, "We have changed the fundamental nature of island warfare. Previously, prepared defensive positions required direct assault by infantry, resulting in tremendous casualties. Our artillery can now destroy these positions from a distance, reducing them to rubble before our infantry arrives. The Japanese have excellent soldiers and sophisticated fortifications, but they cannot overcome our industrial capacity to produce unlimited ammunition and deliver it with precision. We are not fighting a conventional military campaign. We are conducting industrial demolition of enemy positions." The ammunition consumption during the Iwo Jima campaign revealed the scale of American industrial production. The 4 Marine Artillery battalions fired 203,914 rounds of 155mm ammunition, totaling 19,372 tons of ordnance. To put this in perspective, this single battle consumed more artillery ammunition than the entire Japanese army fired in all Pacific campaigns combined during 1944. Each day of combat at Iwo Jima required more ammunition than Japan could produce in a month. The logistical achievement was as remarkable as the tactical success. Liberty ships delivered palletized ammunition directly to ammunition dumps established behind the beaches. Tracked vehicles carried shells to gun positions over terrain that would have been impassable for wheeled transport. The entire supply chain, from factories in Ohio to gun positions on Iwo Jima, operated with assembly line efficiency. The Japanese response to American artillery supremacy revealed both their tactical sophistication and strategic hopelessness. General Kuribayashi ordered his artillery to engage American gun positions rather than the more visible targets of landing craft and supply dumps. This artillery duel, fought primarily during hours of darkness, demonstrated the qualitative superiority of American equipment and training. Japanese guns, firing from prepared positions with excellent concealment, initially achieved surprise and caused casualties among American artillery crews. However, American counter-battery fire, directed by sound-ranging equipment and aerial observation, systematically eliminated Japanese artillery positions. The contest was unequal from the beginning. American gun crews received continuous replacement ammunition, while Japanese batteries fired their limited ammunition reserves and fell silent. The technological gap extended beyond the weapons to the men who operated them. American artillery crews had received extensive training in the United States, including live fire exercises with full ammunition allowances. Japanese artillery personnel, by contrast, had received minimal training due to ammunition shortages. Many Japanese gunners had never fired their weapons before the battle began. American crews could engage multiple targets simultaneously using mechanical fire control computers. Japanese crews calculated firing data manually, a process that required significantly more time and was prone to error. When American artillery responded to Japanese fire, their first adjustment rounds typically landed within 50 yards of the target. Japanese adjustment fire, when ammunition was available for ranging, often required multiple corrections before achieving accuracy. The effectiveness of American artillery at Iwo Jima convinced Japanese military leaders that conventional defensive tactics were obsolete. General Kuribayashi's post-battle analysis, transmitted to Tokyo before his death, contained a stark assessment. American artillery has rendered fixed fortifications meaningless. They possess unlimited ammunition and can maintain accurate fire for weeks without pause. Our concrete bunkers, designed to withstand naval bombardment, cannot survive sustained artillery attack. Future defensive positions must be either so deep underground as to be immune to artillery, or so mobile as to avoid sustained engagement. The intermediate positions that we have traditionally relied upon are death traps against American firepower. The human drama of individual artillery crews reveals the transformation of warfare that American industrial capacity had achieved. Corporal Robert Leckie, gunner on a 155mm howitzer with Battery A, 2nd Battalion, 11th Marine Regiment, described the routine of continuous fire missions. We fire every few minutes around the clock. The gun gets so hot, we have to pour water on the barrel to prevent warping. Each shell weighs 95 pounds, and we handle hundreds daily. My crew has fired over 2,000 rounds since landing. In previous wars, artillery ammunition was precious, rationed carefully for critical moments. Here, we fire whenever a target appears. The supply sergeants tell us not to worry about ammunition consumption. The ships keep bringing more. This casual abundance, impossible for Japanese forces to match, represented the decisive advantage that American industrial production provided. The medical consequences of concentrated artillery fire became apparent as Marines advanced through areas that had been subjected to intensive bombardment. Dr. James Vedder, surgeon with the 5th Marine Division, established aid stations in former Japanese positions and observed the effects of American ordnance on human beings. His clinical notes, preserved in military medical archives, provide disturbing testimony to the lethality of modern artillery. The 155mm high-explosive shell creates casualties unlike anything I observed in previous campaigns. The combination of blast effect, fragmentation, and structural collapse causes multiple trauma that is often unsurvivable. In positions that receive direct hits, we find no wounded Japanese soldiers, only fatalities. The shells are so powerful that survival within the lethal radius is impossible. Dr. Vedder's observations confirmed what artillery officers had calculated. The M1 155mm howitzer was optimized for maximum lethality against personnel in fortified positions. The capture of Japanese artillery positions provided American intelligence officers with detailed information about enemy capabilities and limitations. Major Frank Caldwell, intelligence officer with the 3rd Marine Division, catalogued captured Japanese artillery pieces and discovered significant technological deficiencies. Japanese 150mm howitzers, while similar in caliber to American weapons, were manufactured to lower precision standards. Barrel tolerances varied by millimeters, rather than the thousandths of an inch maintained by American production. This reduced accuracy at long range and limited barrel life. More critically, Japanese ammunition revealed severe quality control problems. Shell casings showed inconsistent wall thickness. Propellant charges varied in composition and burning rate. Fuses failed at rates that would have been unacceptable in American production. Major Caldwell's technical analysis concluded that Japanese artillery was adequate for short-range defensive fire, but incapable of sustained precision engagement. The logistics of artillery operations at Iwo Jima demonstrated American organizational capabilities that exceeded Japanese comprehension. Each 155mm howitzer required daily delivery of ammunition, replacement parts, and maintenance supplies. The complexity of coordinating these requirements for 48 guns over 36 days of combat would have overwhelmed most military logistics systems. American quartermasters, however, had developed standardized procedures that made complex operations routine. Ammunition was pre-positioned in dumps located within 1,000 yards of gun positions. Replacement barrels, required after approximately 5,000 rounds of firing, were maintained in floating depots offshore. Maintenance teams with specialized tools could replace a worn barrel in 6 hours, compared to 24 hours required by Japanese procedures. This logistical infrastructure ensured that American artillery never ceased firing due to supply shortages. As the Battle for Iwo Jima entered its final phase in mid-March 1945, Japanese resistance had been reduced to isolated pockets of defenders in the island's northern areas. These remaining positions, carved deep into volcanic rock, represented the most challenging targets American artillery had yet faced. The caves and tunnels were immune to direct fire and could only be reached by shells with delayed fuses that penetrated underground before exploding. The M67 point-detonating delay fuse, specifically designed for this purpose, allowed 155mm shells to penetrate 6 feet of rock before exploding. This capability, combined with the howitzer's high-angle fire, made it possible to attack targets that were unreachable by any other weapon. The final Japanese artillery position to be silenced was a battery of 3 150mm howitzers concealed in caves on the island's northern coast. These guns had continued firing despite weeks of counter-battery attacks because their positions were too deep underground for conventional shells to reach. Lieutenant Colonel Pate, commanding the 1st Battalion, 13th Marine Regiment, developed a technique specifically for this target. Using maximum propellant charges and M67 delay fuse, his howitzers fired at extreme elevation to achieve nearly vertical trajectories. The shells penetrated the cave entrances and exploded deep underground, collapsing the tunnels and burying the Japanese guns. This engagement, on March 21st, 1945, marked the last artillery duel of the Pacific War's bloodiest battle. The statistics of artillery consumption at Iwo Jima tell the story of American industrial supremacy more clearly than any narrative could. The 3,914 rounds of 155mm ammunition fired during the battle represented 19,372 tons of ordnance delivered with precision against fortified targets. Each shell cost $47 to produce in $1945, making the total artillery expenditure approximately $9.6 million. This investment in ammunition paid extraordinary dividends in reduced American casualties. Traditional infantry assaults against prepared positions typically cost 10 to 15 casualties per position reduced. Artillery preparation reduced this ratio to 3 to 4 casualties per position. The arithmetic of firepower had replaced the arithmetic of blood, making victory possible at acceptable cost. The technological lessons learned at Iwo Jima influenced American military doctrine for decades. The effectiveness of precision artillery fire against fortified positions demonstrated that industrial capacity could substitute for tactical innovation. Rather than developing new assault techniques, American forces could rely on overwhelming firepower to neutralize defensive positions before infantry arrived. This doctrine, successful against Japan's static defenses, would prove problematic in future conflicts against mobile enemies who could not be targeted by conventional artillery. However, at Iwo Jima, the combination of American industrial production and Japanese fixed defenses created ideal conditions for artillery effectiveness. The human cost of the artillery campaign was measured not only in Japanese casualties, but also in the psychological impact on American personnel. Continuous exposure to the sounds and effects of artillery fire, even friendly fire, caused stress reactions among Marines who were not directly engaged in combat. Dr. Roy Grinker, psychiatrist with the Navy Medical Corps, documented cases of artillery neurosis among personnel who had been subjected to weeks of friendly artillery fire passing overhead. The psychological effects of modern firepower, he concluded, affected everyone within the battle zone, regardless of their specific role in combat. The capture of Iwo Jima on March 26, 1945, marked more than a tactical victory. It demonstrated that American industrial capacity, properly applied through superior weapons and unlimited ammunition, could overcome any defensive position. The 155mm howitzer had proven itself the most effective weapon for reducing fortified positions, capable of precision fire at long range with devastating effect against underground targets. More significantly, the battle had shown that America could sustain intensive combat operations indefinitely, limited only by the enemy's ability to absorb punishment rather than by American resources or industrial capacity. Part 2 of 2, General Kuribayashi's final radio transmission to Tokyo, sent just hours before his death on March 26, 1945, contained an acknowledgement that would have seemed impossible when the battle began. American artillery has achieved absolute supremacy. We cannot move, cannot fire, cannot reinforce our positions. Their shells find us wherever we hide. They have unlimited ammunition and unlimited time. We face not an army, but an industrial system that produces destruction faster than we can absorb it. This is not warfare as our military doctrine understands it. This is the systematic elimination of our forces by machines that never tire. This transmission was intercepted by American signals intelligence and became part of the permanent record documenting Japan's recognition of American industrial superiority. The success of the 155mm howitzer at Iwo Jima accelerated production plans for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan itself. Military planners calculated that Japanese home island defenses would be even more sophisticated than those encountered at Iwo Jima, requiring unprecedented amounts of artillery support. The War Department authorized production of an additional 2,000 M155mm howitzers specifically for the Japan invasion, along with 5 million rounds of ammunition. American factories, operating at peak efficiency, could have delivered these weapons within 6 months. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki made this production unnecessary, but the industrial capacity existed to support artillery operations on an even larger scale. The Japanese military's analysis of the Iwo Jima defeat focused heavily on American artillery supremacy. A captured document from Imperial General Headquarters, dated April 15, 1945, concluded that American artillery represents a revolution in military capability that our forces cannot match. Their ability to produce unlimited ammunition, deliver it to remote locations, and apply it with precision against fortified targets makes traditional defensive strategies obsolete. Future operations must assume that fixed positions cannot be held against American artillery attack. This assessment influenced Japanese preparations for homeland defense, emphasizing mobile tactics and underground positions that could not be targeted by conventional artillery. The technological innovations that made the M155mm howitzer effective at Iwo Jima found applications beyond military use. The precision manufacturing techniques developed for gun tubes were applied to civilian machinery after the war. The ballistic computers used for fire control became the foundation for early electronic calculators. The high-strength steel alloys developed for artillery shells found uses in construction and automotive industries. The mass production techniques that enabled manufacture of thousands of artillery pieces were adapted for civilian goods, contributing to America's post-war economic boom. The industrial infrastructure created for artillery production became the foundation for America's emergence as the world's dominant manufacturing power. The individual stories of artillery crews at Iwo Jima reveal the human dimension of American industrial warfare. Staff Sergeant Mike Strank, gun commander of a 155mm howitzer with the 5th Marine Division, wrote to his family describing the routine of continuous fire missions. "We fire day and night without stopping. The Japs are dug in so deep that only direct hits can get them. Our job is to put shells exactly where the forward observers want them. Yesterday we fired 127 rounds at a single bunker. Each shell had to be perfect because Marines are counting on us to clear the way. The responsibility is enormous, but our equipment is so good that we rarely miss. The gun is accurate to within yards at maximum range. The shells explode exactly when the fuse is set for. Everything works as advertised." Strank was killed by Japanese sniper fire on March 1, 1945. but his letters capture the confidence that superior equipment gave American personnel. The ammunition supply system that supported artillery operations at Iwo Jima represented a logistical achievement comparable to the Normandy invasion. Each 155mm shell required individual handling from factory to firing position, a process that involved loading onto railroad cars in the United States, transfer to ships for Pacific transport, unloading at forward supply bases, and final delivery to gun positions on Iwo Jima. The fact that this system functioned flawlessly throughout the 36-day battle, delivering over 200,000 shells without significant delays or shortages, demonstrated American organizational capabilities that exceeded anything previously achieved in warfare. Japanese forces, by contrast, had consumed their entire artillery ammunition reserve within the first week of combat. The effectiveness of American artillery at Iwo Jima was amplified by technological superiority in areas beyond the weapons themselves. American forward observers carried SCR-610 radio sets that provided reliable communication with fire direction centers under all weather conditions. Japanese observers relied on telephone lines that were easily severed by American bombardment. American fire direction centers used mechanical computers that could calculate firing data for complex missions in minutes. Japanese calculations were performed manually, requiring significantly more time and limiting the number of targets that could be engaged. American ammunition was manufactured to tolerances that ensured consistent performance. Japanese shells showed significant variations in explosive content and ballistic characteristics that reduced accuracy and reliability. The crater analysis conducted by American engineers after the battle provided quantitative evidence of the 155mm howitzer's effectiveness against fortified positions. Each 95-pound high-explosive shell created a crater approximately 30 feet in diameter and 8 feet deep in the volcanic soil of Iwo Jima. Against reinforced concrete bunkers, the shells could penetrate 8 feet of construction before exploding, causing structural collapse through blast effect and fragmentation. The delayed fuse shells, designed specifically for underground targets, could penetrate 6 feet of solid rock before exploding, making them effective against cave positions that were immune to other weapons. These technical capabilities, combined with unlimited ammunition supply, made American artillery the decisive weapon in the campaign. The psychological warfare aspect of American artillery operations was as important as their physical destructive power. The knowledge that American guns could fire continuously for weeks, delivering precise fire against any target, undermined Japanese morale even in positions that had not yet been directly attacked. Captured diaries and interrogation reports reveal that Japanese soldiers lived in constant fear of artillery attack, knowing that no position was safe and that American ammunition supplies were unlimited. This psychological pressure, combined with the physical destruction of defensive positions, created a climate of hopelessness that accelerated Japanese surrender in the final phase of the battle. The medical treatment of American artillery casualties revealed both the dangers of operating large-caliber weapons and the sophistication of American military medicine. Premature explosions, equipment failures, and enemy counter-battery fire caused 312 casualties among American artillery personnel during the Iwo Jima campaign. However, the survival rate for these casualties was 87%, compared to 45% for similar injuries in World War I. Improved medical procedures, rapid evacuation to hospital ships, and advanced surgical techniques ensured that most artillery crew members who survived their initial injuries made full recoveries. This medical support system gave American personnel confidence that they would receive the best possible care if wounded, contributing to high morale among gun crews. The captured Japanese documents that became available after the fall of Iwo Jima provided unprecedented insight into enemy perceptions of American artillery capabilities. A report written by Colonel Kanehiko Atsuchi, commanding the 145th Infantry Regiment, concluded that American artillery operates on principles that our military education did not prepare us to counter. They fire more ammunition in one day than our regulations allocate for 1 month. Their accuracy at long range exceeds our accuracy at short range. Their fire direction is so rapid that they can engage targets of opportunity within minutes of identification. We have no effective counter to these capabilities except to avoid detection, which becomes impossible once they begin systematic area bombardment. The transformation of Pacific warfare that American artillery superiority represented became clear when Iwo Jima was compared to previous island campaigns. At Tarawa, in 1943, the lack of adequate artillery support had forced Marines to assault prepared positions with rifles and grenades, resulting in 3,407 casualties for an island 1/10 the size of Iwo Jima. At Saipan, in 1944, improved artillery support had reduced the casualty rate, but direct infantry assault was still required for most positions. At Iwo Jima, artillery preparation was so thorough that many positions were abandoned by their defenders before Marines arrived. The evolution from bloody frontal assault to systematic artillery reduction represented a revolution in military capability that saved thousands of American lives. The industrial statistics that supported artillery operations at Iwo Jima revealed the enormous scale of American war production. The 203,914 rounds of 155mm ammunition fired during the battle required 19,372 tons of high-explosive ordnance, 61,175 tons of steel for shell casings, and 3,059 tons of precision machinery for fuses. This single battle consumed more industrial production than many nations could achieve in years of peacetime manufacturing. The fact that this enormous expenditure was sustained while simultaneously supporting operations in Europe and throughout the Pacific demonstrated American industrial capacity that exceeded anything previously achieved in human history. The technical analysis of Japanese defensive positions after their capture revealed both the sophistication of their construction and the devastating effectiveness of American artillery. Japanese engineers had created bunkers with reinforced concrete walls up to 6 feet thick, designed to withstand direct hits from 16-inch naval guns. These positions were indeed immune to naval gunfire, which struck at relatively flat trajectories. However, the high-angle fire of 155mm howitzers could penetrate bunker roofs, which were typically only 3 feet thick. Moreover, the sustained nature of artillery bombardment created structural fatigue that caused eventual collapse even of bunkers that survived initial hits. American artillery had not only overcome Japanese defenses through raw power, but had exploited structural vulnerabilities that naval gunfire could not reach. The lasting impact of the Iwo Jima artillery campaign extended far beyond the battle itself. The success of precision artillery fire against fortified positions influenced American military doctrine for the remainder of the 20th century. The Korean War, Vietnam War, and Persian Gulf War all featured extensive use of artillery and airstrikes to reduce enemy positions before ground assault. This doctrine, first proven at Iwo Jima, became the standard American approach to warfare. Apply overwhelming firepower to minimize casualties among American personnel. While this approach proved less effective against guerrilla forces who could not be targeted by conventional weapons, it remained the foundation of American military strategy for dealing with conventional enemies. The memorial services held for Japanese defenders after the war included recognition of their courage in facing overwhelming American firepower. General Kuribayashi and his men had fought with skill and determination against impossible odds, inflicting 28,686 American casualties, despite being outnumbered and outgunned. However, their tactical excellence could not overcome the industrial capacity that allowed American forces to fire over 200,000 artillery shells with precision accuracy. The Battle of Iwo Jima demonstrated that in modern warfare, industrial production capacity was more decisive than military skill or personal courage. The post-war analysis conducted by the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey concluded that American artillery effectiveness at Iwo Jima represented the most efficient application of firepower against fortified positions in military history. The survey calculated that artillery preparation reduced American casualties by an estimated 40% compared to what would have been required using traditional assault methods. This reduction represented approximately 11,000 American lives saved through superior firepower. The cost in ammunition, $9.6 million, was insignificant compared to the human cost that direct assault would have required. The arithmetic of industrial warfare had replaced the arithmetic of blood, making victory possible at acceptable cost. The technological legacy of the M155mm howitzer extended well beyond World War II. The weapon remained in American service through the Korean War and was widely exported to Allied nations. Its basic design principles influenced the development of subsequent artillery systems, including the M114 155mm howitzer used in Vietnam, and the M198 towed howitzer currently in service. The precision manufacturing techniques developed for the M1's production became standard for all subsequent artillery weapons. The fire control systems pioneered for the M1 evolved into the computerized fire direction systems used by modern artillery. The weapon that proved decisive at Iwo Jima became the foundation for decades of American artillery development. The individual accounts of Japanese survivors, documented during post-war interviews, provided powerful testimony to the effectiveness of American artillery. Private Tadashi Kobayashi, one of only 216 Japanese soldiers who survived the battle, described the experience of being under constant artillery fire. The American shells came without warning, day and night, for weeks. We could hear the guns firing in the distance, then count the seconds until the shells arrived. Always 30 seconds. Always accurate. Always devastating. Our concrete bunkers, which we thought were impregnable, were systematically destroyed. Not by single lucky hits, but by repeated accurate fire that gradually wore down our defenses. It was like being attacked by a machine that never tired, never missed, never ran out of ammunition. The ammunition expenditure at Iwo Jima, when viewed in the context of the entire Pacific War, revealed the scale of American industrial mobilization. The 203,914 rounds of 155mm ammunition fired during this single battle exceeded the total artillery ammunition available to Japan for all Pacific operations throughout 1944. American factories were producing more artillery shells monthly than Japan could produce annually. This disparity in production capacity made prolonged resistance impossible for Japanese forces, regardless of their skill or determination. The Battle of Iwo Jima was decided by factory workers in Ohio and Pennsylvania, as much as by Marines on the volcanic beaches. The final Japanese position to be eliminated was a complex of caves in the island's northern sector that had resisted weeks of bombardment. These positions, carved 40 feet underground in solid volcanic rock, were immune to conventional artillery fire. The solution came from Captain Robert Dunlap, forward observer with the 3rd Battalion, 13th Marine Regiment, who developed a technique for using delayed fuse shells to collapse cave entrances. By firing shells at maximum elevation with M67 delay fuses, his artillery could achieve nearly vertical trajectories that allowed penetration of cave openings. The shells exploded deep underground, causing structural collapse that buried the Japanese defenders. This final innovation in artillery technique ended organized resistance on Iwo Jima and demonstrated the adaptability of American artillery doctrine. The strategic impact of American artillery superiority extended beyond tactical success to influence Japanese decisions about continuing the war. The Imperial General Staff's analysis of the Iwo Jima defeat concluded that American firepower capabilities made successful defense of the Japanese home islands impossible using conventional tactics. This assessment contributed to Japanese consideration of surrender, as military leaders recognized that American artillery and air power could systematically destroy Japanese positions without requiring costly ground assault. The demonstration of American firepower at Iwo Jima, therefore, played a role in hastening the war's end by convincing Japanese leaders that continued resistance was futile. As the guns fell silent on Iwo Jima on March 26, 1945, the island's volcanic landscape had been transformed into a moonscape of craters and rubble. The 203,914 rounds of 155mm artillery fire had eliminated virtually every Japanese defensive position, turning sophisticated fortifications into debris. The cost in American lives, while heavy at 6,821 killed, was significantly lower than would have been required using traditional assault methods. The arithmetic of firepower had proven superior to the arithmetic of blood, demonstrating that American industrial capacity could substitute for casualties in achieving military objectives. The legacy of the 155mm howitzer at Iwo Jima extends to the present day in American military doctrine and equipment. The principle that overwhelming firepower can reduce casualties among American personnel remains central to U.S. military planning. Modern artillery systems, while technologically advanced beyond anything available in 1945, still follow the basic concept proven at Iwo Jima. Use precision fire to eliminate enemy positions before ground forces arrive. The M155mm howitzer that proved decisive in the Pacific War's bloodiest battle established the foundation for American artillery doctrine that continues to influence military operations worldwide. The story of the 155mm guns that crushed Japan's defenses at Iwo Jima represents more than a tactical success. It demonstrates how American industrial capacity, properly organized and applied, could overcome any military obstacle. The combination of mass production, technological sophistication, and unlimited resources created a weapons system that made traditional defensive strategies obsolete. The Japanese defenders, despite their skill and courage, could not overcome an enemy that fired more ammunition in one day than they possessed for the entire battle. In the end, the Battle of Iwo Jima was won not by superior tactics or individual heroism, but by superior industrial production applied with devastating effect against a brave but overwhelmed enemy. The 95-pound shells that rained down on Iwo Jima carried more than high explosive. They carried the weight of American industrial might, the precision of American engineering, and the determination of American workers to support their forces in combat. Each shell represented dozens of factory workers, engineers, and logisticians who had contributed to its production and delivery. The victory at Iwo Jima belonged not only to the Marines who fought on the island, but to the entire American industrial system that made their success possible. The final tally speaks for itself. 203,914 rounds fired, 19,372 tons of ordnance delivered, 95% accuracy rate maintained throughout 36 days of combat. Against this firepower, Japanese skill and determination proved insufficient. The 155mm howitzer had not only crushed Japan's defenses at Iwo Jima, but had demonstrated the decisive importance of industrial capacity in modern warfare. In the arithmetic of total war, production capacity proved more important than tactical brilliance, and American factories had written the equation for victory in the volcanic ash of a small Pacific island that would be remembered forever.